It has been a year since my daughter Nicole and her husband Jason moved in with us, and they have since welcomed their adorable baby boy, Matthew. Today is the day my mother-in-law, Michelle, will meet Matthew for the first time. My husband, Christopher, had gone to pick up Michelle and was just returning with her. I've brought Michelle home, everyone. Oh, welcome, Grandma. Nicole, who had always been very close to Michelle since she was a child, had been looking forward to this moment ever since she gave birth. We live separately from Michelle. Considering her age and health, I often feel uneasy about the future, but it was all out of consideration for Michelle's unique constitution. She has a natural sensitivity to the spiritual world, making it difficult for her to be around large groups of people, as she feels overwhelmed by the spiritual energy. Seeing her arrive, Nicole's eyes lit up with excitement. Encouraged by Nicole's eager expression, I walked over to Michelle with Matthew, whom I had been holding and soothing. Welcome, Michelle. This is Matthew. Suddenly, she clutched her chest and appeared to be in pain. Michelle? Just moments ago, Michelle had been smiling calmly, but as soon as she saw Matthew, her eyes widened in shock, and she collapsed on the spot. What's wrong, Michelle? Are you okay? It hurts, it's painful, that child is, no. She desperately tried to convey something. In stark contrast, Matthew remained innocent and smiled happily in my arms. My name is Elizabeth. I used to work as a nursing care worker, but now I am retired and live with my husband Christopher, my daughter Nicole, and her husband Jason. Our peaceful life as a family of 4 is fulfilling, but there are a few concerns. I wish Grandma could live with us, Nicole said wistfully as she sipped her coffee. Currently, we live separately from Michelle. Michelle is 91 years old this year. Given my professional background, the idea of not being close by to support her, or what to do if something happens, constantly worries me. Yes, but I remembered the time I had suggested to her that she live with us. It's more comfortable for me to live alone and spend my days leisurely. That's her choice, and there's nothing we can do about it. Despite being 91, Michelle is incredibly energetic. Her letters often recount her mountain climbing adventures. She told me before that she loves the mountains because she feels at peace surrounded by nature's energy. Also, she seems to have a strong sensitivity to emotions, especially other people's feelings. I shared a memory with Nicole while enjoying a slightly indulgent cup of coffee. When you were still in preschool, there was a time when you went missing, remember? What? Really? Nicole exclaimed in surprise. She might not remember much since she was so young then. But at that time, Christopher and I were frantically searching for Nicole, so much so that even strangers offered to help. We called our neighbors and searched around the preschool and the neighborhood, but we couldn't find you anywhere. Christopher suggested we talk to Michelle. And then, your grandma. Over 10 years ago, Michelle was much more energetic than she is now. When I consulted her, "That's really tough," she said and quietly closed her eyes on the spot. I wondered what she was doing, but there was something about her atmosphere that made me feel I shouldn't speak, so I remained silent. A few seconds later, Michelle clutched her chest in pain and said as if she was feeling it herself, "She's in a dark place. It's lonely and it hurts a lot." When we focused on searching dark places as Michelle suggested, we found Nicole, who had sprained her ankle and couldn't move, inside a hole near a nearby embankment. No way! I don't remember that at all. Afterwards, when I asked her how she knew, she just said she could sense Nicole's fear. After finishing the story, Christopher, who had been quietly reading the newspaper, looked up and softened his expression nostalgically. Now that you mention it, I do remember that happening. Wow, so psychic abilities really exist. Grandma, you're amazing. I had heard from Christopher that Michelle had psychic abilities, but until that event, I didn't believe it. I myself don't have any psychic abilities, and I thought such things were just fiction. But Michelle's demeanor at that time certainly made me feel she had some kind of supernatural power, and since then, I've been able to accept her strange statements more openly. Because she is sensitive to other people's emotions, which is part of her psychic abilities, I haven't been able to strongly insist that she move in with us. If she has such sensitivities, living alone must indeed be more comfortable for her. Living with others might prevent her from relaxing and even harm her health. However, I can't say this current situation is ideal. I sighed deeply, wondering what to do. And my worries didn't end there. A year ago, after Nicole and her husband Jason got married and started living with us, our front door began getting spray painted with graffiti. It's been spray painted again. One day, when I went outside to do some weeding in the garden, I found the front door covered in noticeable graffiti. Erasing the extensive spray marks by myself was too much effort, so I decided to ask Christopher for help as usual. Christopher, I'm sorry, but could you help me clean off the graffiti? Oh, again? Just give me a moment. The frequency of the graffiti was quite high, and we still had no idea who was doing it. Our house had accumulated a set of tools for removing graffiti in a bucket. This time, it was just a random mess of paint smeared on the door, but sometimes there were clear messages of malice like "curse you" or "I won't forgive you." Who on earth could be doing this? I had asked our neighbors, but none of them had seen anyone doing the graffiti. Our house was well known for being vandalized, and sometimes when we didn't notice, neighbors walking by would knock on our door to let us know. As things stood, even if I wanted to invite Michelle to our house, it would be hard for her to relax. I've got it, let's install a security camera. I had an idea while erasing the graffiti and suggested it to Christopher. We needed to take some action to solve this. Christopher nodded at my suggestion and installed the security camera that very day. Then, after the front door was vandalized again, we checked the camera footage. The time was early morning when most people were still asleep. The footage showed a man dressed entirely in black. Is this person? Do you know? It was hard to identify the person because of the mask and hat, but it was clear that they weren't an acquaintance. However, as soon as Nicole saw this person, her face changed color. When I asked if she knew him, Nicole nodded and said, "Probably. I think it's Brian Jones, who was in college with me. Before I started dating Jason, he confessed his feelings to me. I turned him down, but he kept pestering me after that." Really? Recalling those days, Nicole began to shake her shoulders slightly. Hearing the story, Jason, with a stern look on his face, gently rubbed Nicole's back in a comforting gesture. Apparently, the graffiti culprit's love for Nicole had turned into hatred, leading him to do such things. I don't know what happened between them, but Nicole is not the kind of person to toy with someone's feelings. The sharp glint in the culprit's eyes, along with a gaze filled with madness and hatred, made me feel a chill down my spine. Christopher must have felt the same thing because he spoke in a severe tone. "We should contact the police. Even if it's just graffiti, it's a nuisance, and it could escalate further." Yes, let's do that. It would be too late if something happened. We had the video and several photos of the graffiti, so we had enough evidence. We decided to take this footage to the police. When we explained the situation, the police took it as a malicious act and gave the culprit a stern warning. As Nicole had predicted, the culprit was Brian, who harbored intense hatred towards Nicole and Jason. Brian's parents found out about his mischief, and he had to quit his current job and return to his hometown. After that, the graffiti incidents completely stopped, and we were finally able to feel at ease. However, the uneasy feeling inside me didn't go away. Shortly after that, Nicole's pregnancy was discovered. She had mentioned that she had no appetite despite not feeling unwell, and then we found out. I had already been informed over the phone, so I warmly welcomed Nicole when she returned from the hospital. Nicole, congratulations. Thank you, Mom. From now on, you have to be careful about many things. No vigorous exercise, no lifting heavy objects. Take it easy with work and keep a relaxed mind. I heard that from the nurse many times. Nicole seemed tired of hearing this repeatedly. But her joy was undeniable in her expression. As we talked about the future, the living room door opened. Looking up, I saw Christopher coming back from outside. If you need anything, don't hesitate to rely on us, Nicole. Christopher must have overheard our conversation from outside the room, as he spoke kindly. Standing next to him was Michelle, wearing a joyful smile. I had asked Christopher to pick up Michelle. Congratulations, Nicole. Grandma. When I shared the happy news with Michelle, she was very excited and insisted on coming over. Her enthusiastic voice over the phone had made me happy too, so I asked Christopher to bring her. Michelle grasped Nicole's hands, tears welling up in her eyes. It may be tough from now on, but I'm sure a lovely baby will be born. I'm so looking forward to it. Good things come with long life. Nicole smiled happily and nodded at Michelle's encouragement. It's wonderful to have such a cute baby, isn't it? Do you sense it with your intuition? It's not intuition. It's just a little dream of mine. When I asked this, Michelle winked at me in a playful tone. Yes, of course. Any baby would be adorable. While I was internally regretting my intrusive question, I suddenly remembered the graffiti issue. Oh, Michelle. You mentioned before that someone was doing graffiti on our property, right? Yes, I did. We found out who the culprit was, contacted the police, and there haven't been any more incidents. You don't have to worry anymore, so why don't we live together? Brian has gone back to his hometown, and the neighbors here are all kind and peaceful people. Michelle shouldn't have anything to worry about anymore. However, Michelle shook her head as if the idea was out of the question. No way. I can't imagine living with a happy family like yours. I'm fine as I am. But Michelle, your family too. I tried to persuade her, but in the end, Michelle didn't agree. After that, Nicole's belly grew smoothly, and without any major issues, she gave birth safely. The baby boy was named Matthew. He had a cute face, just like Nicole. I remembered when I gave birth to Nicole and realized that she had grown up to do the same thing I once did, which brought me to tears. Nicole seemed eager to show baby Matthew to Michelle right away, but I advised her not to overexert herself right after childbirth, so the visit was scheduled for a month later. Matthew is really cute. When I cradled him, Matthew smiled innocently. Today is the day Matthew and Michelle will meet for the first time. To help Nicole, who has returned home from the hospital, I try to be as involved in childcare as possible. Above all, the fact that I now have a grandson makes me incredibly happy. Matthew already loves you so much. I'd be delighted if that's true. Thinking that I've finally become a grandma fills me with deep emotion. While talking with Nicole and taking care of Matthew, Christopher came back with Michelle. Here they are, I've brought Mom. Welcome, Grandma. Nicole had wanted Michelle to hold Matthew since the time he was born. With Michelle's long-awaited arrival, Nicole's eyes sparkled. Encouraged by Nicole's look of expectation, I approached Michelle with Matthew in my arms. Michelle, this is Matthew. But the words never left my mouth. Because at that moment, Michelle clutched her chest in pain.
What? Michelle!
Michelle, who had been smiling so peacefully just a moment ago, widened her eyes and collapsed.
Michelle, what's wrong? Are you okay?
It hurts. It hurts so much. That child is not good.
What do you mean? Matthew isn't good?
Sweat beaded on Michelle's forehead as if she was enduring real pain. Her condition was clearly abnormal. Wondering what was happening, I looked at Matthew in my arms, but he just smiled innocently, amused by the adult's frantic behavior. We rubbed Michelle's back and tried to help her sit down, but her complexion didn't improve at all. I told Nicole, who looked anxious, to wait and led Michelle to another room, where she seemed to regain a little bit of her color. Sorry, could you let me go home today? Don't get me wrong, it's not Matthew's fault.
Got it. I'll take you home right away.
Although I felt bad for Christopher, who had brought her here, and Nicole, who had been looking forward to today, I couldn't leave Michelle suffering like this. So, I decided to drive Michelle home as she had requested.
Michelle, are you feeling any better?
Yes, I'm much better now. I'm sorry. Michelle's house is in a place that feels almost at the foot of a mountain, a little away from the residential area. There are few houses around here, and not many people pass by, so Michelle seemed somewhat more relaxed, letting out a deep sigh.
It's okay, you don't need to apologize. But what happened earlier?
Michelle doesn't have any chronic illnesses. Yet she suddenly clutched her chest and started suffering, so there must have been some cause other than illness. I offered her some tea with relaxing properties as I asked. However, Michelle seemed reluctant to recall what had happened, averting her eyes and hesitating with her words. You know, when I looked at Matthew, I felt a very terrifying sensation.
A terrifying sensation?
Her expression was pained, and I had a really bad feeling. It's the same feeling that's been smoldering in my heart since we identified the person who vandalized the property and thought the danger was gone. The terrifying sensation Michelle mentioned must be due to her sensitivity to such things. If her sensitivity reacted the moment she saw Matthew. I suppressed my growing anxiety and called Christopher immediately.
Hello, Christopher. Could you and Jason look around near the house?
What's going on? He probably had been reading the newspaper. Christopher sounded surprised at my sudden request.
I have a feeling there might be someone suspicious around. I have a really bad feeling about this.
Understood, we'll do that. Christopher, having grown up with Michelle's sensitivity, understood even better than I did. He seemed to sense what I was implying, so he quickly called Jason, told Nicole not to leave the house, and stepped outside. I heard the sound of the front door opening over the phone, and my heart began to pound more furiously. I'll call you if anything comes up on this end, Christopher said, intending to hang up. But the next moment, I heard Christopher's angry shout through the phone.
What are you doing there?
The sound of Christopher's hurried footsteps. Christopher and Jason yelling at someone whose voice I didn't recognize. And then, the unpleasant sound of metal scraping against metal.
I won't forgive you. Nicole. You betrayed me and had a kid. Did you think you could be the only one to be happy?
Through the phone, I clearly heard Brian's voice, not the usual calm Christopher, but filled with hatred.
Christopher, what's happening? What's going on? Christopher?
I clung desperately to the phone, but the noise made it impossible to grasp the situation. After those frantic sounds faded, the noises from the other side of the mobile phone eventually quieted down. When I was contacting Christopher from Michelle's house, he had spotted Brian lurking in the shadows of the house. And Brian was carrying a lot of knives. It was clear what he intended to do. Christopher and Jason confronted Brian, who seemed ready to lash out at any moment. Fortunately, Jason, with his martial arts experience, managed to subdue Brian without anyone getting hurt. The police were called immediately afterward, and Brian was finally arrested. As he was being arrested,
"Nicole, it's all your fault, you traitor."
he directed his anger at Nicole, revealing his resentment towards her.
"It's all thanks to Michelle. Really, thank you. If Michelle hadn't noticed, who knows what would have happened."
After things settled down, I visited Michelle's house again. The fact that Nicole and Matthew were safe was largely due to Michelle. The pain Michelle felt at that moment was the intense hatred Brian had towards Matthew. When I brought a cake to thank her, Michelle, as usual, downplayed her role.
"You're exaggerating."
She shrugged.
"I didn't do anything. It was Elizabeth who managed everything, and everyone else who caught the culprit."
No, that's not true. If you say it was thanks to everyone, then that everyone includes you, Michelle. I was truly relieved. The thought of something happening to newborn Matthew or Nicole, who was struggling with her first experience of motherhood, was terrifying. We comforted each other and felt relieved. However, one day when it seemed like the incident had settled down, the doorbell rang ominously. Yes, who is it? Given it was after the incident, I thought it might be the police or a mail carrier and opened the front door. But in the next moment, I regretted it. Hello, we're the Joneses. Is this Nicole's residence? There stood a couple with creepy smiles I didn't recognize. Joneses. We're deeply sorry for the trouble our son caused. Why were Brian's parents at our house? How did they even know our address when we're not acquainted? A bad feeling from that day ran down my spine. We came to apologize directly to Nicole and Matthew. Could we please come in? What were these people saying? I didn't want anything more to do with the perpetrator. And it seemed unnatural for Brian's parents to come to our house to apologize. The incident had just happened. Isn't that something that should be done through a lawyer or the police? There was no way I would let these two meet Nicole and Matthew. I'm sorry, but she is deeply hurt. There's no way I can let her meet you in such a state. Please leave. Please, we just want to apologize. Brian's mom leaned in, putting her hand on the door I was trying to close. Her persistent calm smile made me feel even more terrified. No, thank you. Your apologies mean nothing. If you truly care about Nicole, then please never get involved with her again. When I said this in a stern tone, Brian's mom's eyes widened in surprise. Then, suddenly, she raised her voice so loudly that it could be heard by the neighbors. What? I knew I wasn't wrong. It's horrifying to think that my sweet Brian might have married such a rude person's daughter. To reject Brian, there must be something wrong with Nicole. She must have been toying with Brian. Excuse me. I felt a strange chill run down my spine as I noticed the drastic change in his behavior, so I closed the door and locked it again. If they cause any more trouble, I'll call the police. Thinking that, I gripped my mobile phone tightly, feeling a cold sweat trickle down my back. Brian's parents continued to stand stubbornly in front of our door, but after a while, they seemed to give up and quietly left. I sat down on the floor, relieved. Even though the culprit was caught, it might still be too early to feel completely safe. I decided to share this with my family. Actually, Brian's parents came by today. What? During dinner, when everyone was gathered, I spoke in a tense tone. Nicole's face turned pale with anxiety, and Christopher and Jason furrowed their brows. They insisted on apologizing to Nicole and Matthew directly, and asked to be let in, but I told them to leave. That's unbelievable. There was no sign that Brian's parents genuinely wanted to apologize. I just couldn't understand what they were thinking. They were simply eerie. Then, trying to lighten the dark mood, Christopher said firmly, "Let's move. It's not good that they know our address." I think so too. Although this place was very comfortable to live in, the fact that Brian and his parents knew our address was a constant source of anxiety. Even if everything is okay now, there's no guarantee it will stay that way in the future. Elizabeth, you've been worried about Michelle too, right?
What does that mean?
It was as if Christopher understood everything I had been concerned about as he winked at me. In this way, he might be quite similar to Michelle. Michelle, why don't you come live with us? After successfully moving, I came to visit Michelle's house again. This house was very quiet, suitable for spending the rest of one's life alone, but it felt a bit too lonely for me. The new place is surrounded by nature, and I'm sure you'll like it, Michelle. And besides, through this incident, I realized something. Until now, I had thought that I needed to support Michelle unilaterally. Somewhere in my heart, I saw her as someone to take care of. But that's not all. No matter the differences in our positions, our family can continue to help each other. It's more fun to be together as a family. Nicole and Matthew feel secure when you're around, Michelle. Relying on Michelle. That was my true feeling. When I said this with a serious expression, Michelle gave a gentle smile as if she understood everything.
Elizabeth, you're so stubborn.
So are you, aren't you?
Maybe so.
It somehow became amusing, and we laughed together. Being similar, we would surely get along well in the future too.
That's right. Taking care of Matthew might not be so bad after all.
Thus, the series of events came to an end, and Michelle began living with us in the new house. From now on, we would live peacefully and happily together, but no one yet knew that in the future, as Matthew grew up healthy and strong, he would become overly attached to Michelle, causing Christopher and Nicole to lament.
Looking at your face makes me sick. I can't stand living with a monster anymore.
You're getting off here. From inside the car, my mom's gaze bore down on me, icy cold. At 12, I was told by my parents we were moving, and they put me in the car. Then, about 30 minutes into the drive, I was dropped off alone on the side of the road. Why? Aren't we all moving together? Mom then looked at me like I was trash she couldn't stand, with utter disgust. Don't be stupid. I can't stand the thought of you in the same house. You're useless. Ugly. This is where we part ways. Goodbye. Mom slammed the car door shut. Dad, sitting in the driver's seat, just looked down at me, expressionless, saying nothing. This is terrible. Why? Dad. Mom. I collapsed to my knees on the side of the road, sobbing. Literally abandoned by my parents, I was overwhelmed by sadness and fear. As if a blizzard had stirred within my heart. My face bears a large burn scar. Since childhood, my parents would repeatedly scorn its ugliness. Never allowing me treatment, despising me as a monster, constantly complaining about my behavior for it. Yet, they were my only parents. They were the only ones I could rely on to live. And yet, they abandoned me, their daughter. Don't go. Dad. Mom. The car carrying my parents drove off mercilessly. No matter how much I cried out, my voice couldn't reach them anymore. On a road busy with cars, no one stopped for my cries of agony. Alone, amidst the sound of indifferent engines and concrete scenery, I felt utterly isolated. Am I a monster? Aren't monsters part of the family too? I continued to cry, trembling, hands on the ground. All that spread before me was dark despair. What kind of scars does being called a monster and denied dignity leave on a 12-year-old girl? Please, someone help me. Stunned, I curled up on the side of the wide road. And the next name that came out wasn't my parents'. I'm not a monster. Help me, Grandma. My name is Sophia. I'm now 37, with 2 children. Raised by my dad, a corporate executive, and my mom, a homemaker, until I was 12. I have a large burn scar on my face. From an injury in my childhood, the details of which I don't fully remember. Only the memory of intense heat, pain, and crying out as everything turned red before my eyes. This scar made me the subject of constant stares and whispers, both in preschool and elementary school.
Creepy, ghost girl.
Boys would taunt, and since girls began showing interest in fashion and beauty from an early age, I was ostracized and gossiped about. Naturally, I had no friends, spending recesses alone, reading or studying. My parents explained this scar was due to my carelessness, falling in front of a stove.
You've always been so careless. It's embarrassing for a girl to have such a monstrous face like yours,
Mom would say when discussing the burn. Indeed, looking in the mirror, the red and black mottled skin looked painful. Thinking I could never enjoy fashion or makeup like other girls made me feel gloomy. But being continually rejected by my parents hurt much more than any self-deprecation.
That's why you've grown up to be so gloomy, without a single friend. Remember the sports meet? You couldn't participate because no one wanted you on their team. No one wants to be friends with someone with your personality.
Just like Mom, instead of encouraging me, she added insult to injury as I grappled with hurt and isolation. I was made to wear the same clothes until they were tattered, and every time I outgrew them, she would click her tongue in disapproval. Meals consisted of leftovers from Dad and Mom or expired deli items, carelessly placed on the floor, and I never ate with the family. Yet, Mom would often claim she was taking care of me. My dad was often absent due to his busy job, and when he was home, his demeanor was no different from Mom's.
Your face is truly disgusting. With a face like that, you'll never get married.
Because of this, they never protected me. Being constantly rejected by my parents made me believe I was worthless. Ugly in appearance, dark in personality, and ignored by everyone. I felt I had no place at home or at school. Maybe there was no point in living at all. Broken-hearted, I shut myself in my room and immersed myself deeper into my books. The books I read were always borrowed from the school library, ranging from children's literature to biographies of great people, histories of various countries, and even books on unusual sciences. I had plenty of time to myself. Dad was an executive at his company, and he and Mom, being close, often went on trips together, funded by their ample wealth. Being disliked by my parents, I was never taken along, always left to house sit. During these times, I was usually left with Dad's grandma. Staying at Grandma's house felt much more comfortable than being at my own. She was the president of a health food company and lived in a spacious single-family home. She never spoke ill of my burn scars and treated me with respect as an individual. There was also a live-in housekeeper named Emily, who was always kind to me and played with me. When I talked about the books I had recently read, Emily would listen intently without showing any annoyance. If there was something difficult in the books, Grandma and Emily would explain it to me carefully, or sometimes we would research it together. They often helped me with my studies too.
Sophia, are you reading such difficult books already? That's amazing.
Sophia, you're really smart. Being intelligent is important in life. Let's continue to develop that. I had no place at home or school, but both Grandma and Emily always affirmed me. I only felt less alone when I was left at their house. However, I couldn't stay there forever. When my parents' trip was over, Mom would come to pick me up. Those moments were a bit scary for me. In front of Grandma, Mom would hide her true nature and thank her in a voice higher than usual. "I'm really sorry for always imposing. I don't know how to thank you enough for taking care of such a child for us." "Thank you, truly." After being sent off by Grandma and others, Mom's demeanor would change as soon as we were alone. Her face, previously plastered with a forced smile, would quickly turn to disdain towards me. "Come on, let's go home." Mom, carrying a bunch of fancy souvenirs from the trip, would yank my arm hard. "Don't get too comfortable just because Grandma is kind to you. Even Grandma must find you disgusting. She probably finds it a hassle to deal with you. She's just putting up with it for us. Don't you dare take it for granted." With those words, Mom glared at me. By the time I was dragged out the door, Grandma and Emily could no longer see what was happening. I was roughly pulled along and put back in the car to go home. Back home, the cycle of constant rejection resumed. I didn't have the courage to run away as a primary school student, so I endured everything except for the times I was left at Grandma's house. Then I turned 12 and reached 6th grade. Life didn't change. In fact, it got worse as the girls in my class became more aware of beauty standards. With my burn scars, I was even more ostracized and isolated than before. The harassment from the girls increased, with them saying mean things loudly enough for me to hear or hiding my belongings. Then one day, my parents suddenly announced we were moving. And it seemed the move was scheduled quite soon, as they immediately instructed me to start packing. I had few belongings, my clothes were minimal, and I read books borrowed from the school library, so my packed items barely filled one cardboard box. And then came the day of departure. A few days ago, snow had fallen, cooling down the entire town. I was in the car, heading to our new home with my parents. At that point, I hadn't been told where we were moving to. With various anxieties in my heart, I was swayed by the car. Then, about 10 minutes down the road, the car suddenly stopped and the door opened. "You're getting off here," said my mom with an icy tone, sitting next to me. "Wait, just me?" I asked, taken aback. Sighing heavily, she then looked at me with disdain, as if I were mere trash. Among the parents of my classmates, my mom was known for her beauty and elegance. Despite the day's moving chaos, she was dressed in a floral dress, her makeup impeccable, and her long hair styled meticulously. The transformation of her lips, adorned in red lipstick, into a sneer of disgust was oddly terrifying to me as a child. "How do you not understand? You're the only one getting out here. We're not taking you with us to the new place." "You're kidding me," I whispered in despair. Ignoring my protests, my mom pushed forcefully on my back, urging me out of the car. "I can't stand living with a monster like you anymore. You're useless and ugly. This is where we say goodbye, then." Her gaze from inside the car was as cold as ice. She then unilaterally slammed the car door shut. Sitting in the driver's seat, my dad looked down on me with a blank expression, silent. "How could you do this? Please don't go. Dad. Mom." I sobbed, collapsing to my knees on the road. Literally abandoned by my parents, the world in front of me turned pitch black, filled with sorrow and fear. The winter road felt cold, adding to the anxiety in my heart. Inside, a cold blizzard raged. Yet, the car carrying my parents mercilessly drove away. No matter how much I screamed after it, my voice could no longer reach. No one stopped for my cries of agony. I was utterly alone. Am I a monster? Aren't monsters part of a family? Kneeling on the ground, I continued to cry, shivering. Before me, only a vast expanse of utter despair spread out. How much of a scar does being called a monster and denied dignity leave on a 12-year-old girl? I'm not a monster. Please, somebody help me, Grandma. The name that came out was no longer that of my parents. Slowly standing up, my vision blurred by tears, I turned around. There stood the grand gate to my grandmother's house. That's right, my parents had abandoned me at my grandmother's doorstep. The moment I resolved to seek her help, the gate opened with a creak.
Thought I heard a car and a girl's voice. Sophia, what in the world happened?
Seeing my tear-streaked face, Grandma exclaimed in surprise. Tears fell from my eyes once again at the sight of her. These weren't tears of shock or despair. Seeing Grandma's face allowed me to cry in relief. Her wise and kind face melted the ice that had formed around my heart. I ran to Grandma and hugged her tightly. Grandma, I've been abandoned by Dad and Mom. They said they couldn't stand living with a monster anymore. That monsters aren't part of the family. I don't know what to do. I continued to cry in Grandma's arms. As I calmed down, still embracing me, Grandma said in a gentle voice, "What a thing to happen. You've had it tough, haven't you? It must have been lonely and scary, but you're safe now. It's good that they dropped you off here. I'll take care of you with all my love." I nodded, crying. "It's cold out here, let's go inside," she said, leading me into the house. The large house had many rooms, but I was always taken to the one Grandma used as a dining room. My body, chilled by the harsh winter wind, gradually warmed up. Grandma made me a warm and delicious soup and listened carefully as I told her everything. When I had finished speaking, Grandma's face was tight with anger and disbelief.
I always thought they were lazy and only interested in luxury, but I never imagined they would go so far as to abandon their own daughter.
Grandma continued, shaking her hand.
I hesitated to say this about my own son, but ever since they started leaving you with me to go on luxurious trips, I had my suspicions.
Sorry. I blurted out, apologizing instinctively. It's okay, dear. Having Sophia here is a joy for both me and Emily. We love talking to you. But it bothered me that it was always just the two of them on these trips, not a family vacation. And when I saw the luxury items they brought back, I couldn't help but feel they were enjoying their lavish lifestyle at your expense. After finishing her soup, Grandma looked at me and smiled, saying, "It's going to be all right.
I'll protect you. And as for them, they'll get what they deserve for abandoning Sophia. Rest easy now, you're safe here with us."
Thank you, Grandma. I'm grateful, I said. Then Emily arrived. After Grandma explained the situation to her, they began to prepare a meal together for the three of us. The meat was juicy, the salad was filled with fresh vegetables. With delicious soup and a variety of other dishes, it was a feast that filled both body and soul.
To welcome Sophia, let's have a party.
With a beaming smile, Grandma spoke. The three of us quickly passed the time enjoying our meal. After dinner, Grandma sat me down for a serious talk. It was about the burn on my face. I had been told by my mom that it was my fault for being careless and bumping into the stove when I was little. However, the truth Grandma told was completely different. My dad, currently an executive at a subsidiary of Grandma's company, was vice president at the headquarters back then. However, his performance and attitude towards employees became a problem, leading to his demotion. Though he took an executive position at the subsidiary, his salary significantly decreased compared to what it was when he was a potential president. This led to an argument with my mom after she found out. Upset that they could no longer live luxuriously, my mom became furious, and the argument escalated. In an attempt to push my dad, my mom's arm hit me, and I was pushed into the stove face first with great force. That was the real story behind my burn. It wasn't my carelessness, but my parents' fault. And my mom lied to me to protect herself, continuously insulting me about the scar as if I were an outlet for her stress. "That's awful," I said.
"Yes, it is. I debated whether to tell you, given your age, but considering your situation, I felt responsible for staying silent. So, I thought it was time to tell you," Grandma explained.
"Thank you for telling me," I replied. My feelings towards my parents shifted from fear to anger. I longed to prove them wrong someday. What could I do? My studies were all I had, but Grandma once told me my intelligence could be my weapon. I resolved to focus more on my studies than ever before, determined to get back at my parents. And then, in the blink of an eye, 25 years passed. I followed through with my resolve, and Grandma supported me through college. She also took me to the hospital for treatment of my burn scar. After years of treatment, the scar had faded significantly and became less noticeable as an adult. With makeup, it could be hidden well. During this time, Grandma's house underwent significant renovations and expansions, growing to a size of 990 square meters. The housekeeper changed a few times due to personal reasons, and now Madison was helping with household chores. The year I turned 37, Grandma passed away. At the age of 95. Her health had gradually declined after turning 80, and she passed away peacefully in a hospital after several admissions. Though I grieved for Grandma, who had done so much for me, I had no regrets. I learned many things from her, and vowed to treasure these lessons as I continued with my life. As for my parents, they never once reached out to me. We didn't know each other's contact information, and they never appeared at Grandma's house. Effectively, 25 years had passed in estrangement. Even when Grandma was ill and after her passing, my dad, her son, never showed up. Disgusted at how he could neglect his family to such an extent, I handled all the hospital formalities and funeral arrangements since I had lived with her for so long. The large house felt empty with only me and Madison left. Continuing to work hard, the same year Grandma died, an unexpected visitor came to the house.
"What's happening with Mom's inheritance?"
The person asking as he entered was my dad, whom I hadn't seen in 25 years. Mom was behind him. Both had aged, but their spiteful gaze remained unchanged. Behind them stood Madison, looking troubled, having let them through the gate to the front door. After 25 years without a word exchanged, and not even attending the funeral, why come now? As I wondered, Mom looked me over with a calculating gaze and said mockingly,
"Oh? That monster girl has finally become a human."
She must have been referring to my face. Hearing that, anger boiled inside me. I knew whose fault it was for my appearance. Mom had no right to mock my face. As I glared at them, Dad, seemingly impatient, began pacing and surveying the house as if appraising it. "Ah, remodeled, I see.
Turned into a fine house. This means there's hope for the inheritance."
With those words, I understood their motive. Having learned of Grandma's passing, they were after the inheritance of Grandma, who had been the president of the company.
"You came for the inheritance? After leaving me behind and not contacting me for 25 years. You didn't even come to Grandma's funeral."
My reply turned increasingly angry. Unforgivable. I could never accept it. We had no choice.
"We were on a trip during the funeral. Besides, I'm her son, so I should inherit, right? We got no contact, so we came ourselves."
Irritated by his presumptuous tone, I silently went to fetch a debit card. I didn't want to let my parents into the house. I didn't want their dirty feet trampling over the precious place where Grandma and I had spent our time. Returning to the entrance, I handed them the debit card as demanded. Their greedy smiles at the sight of a large sum of cash were truly revolting. But that expression lasted only a moment, as their faces turned pale upon seeing the debit card and its balance.
What? This is all there is? You're lying, right?
Dad raised his voice, expressing his displeasure. It's not a lie. This is all of Grandma's savings.
You know Mom was the president of the company. It's impossible for someone like her to have only this much saved. There must be another bank account hidden. Hurry up and hand it over.
Dad stormed into the house, ignoring my attempts to stop him. He quickly found the cabinet where valuables were stored and began searching through drawers for other debit cards.
There's nothing. No other debit cards anywhere. I told you there's none. If you understand, then stop rummaging through the house.
Grandma had consolidated her bank accounts into one, so there really were no hidden accounts. No matter how much they searched, they wouldn't find anything else. Dad clicked his tongue loudly, and Mom hysterically raised her voice.
What's the point then? We came all this way because they say you have to claim your inheritance within a year.
That's right. Even if there's no cash, we have this house. It's huge, so this house is ours now, right? Dad looked at me with a smug grin, as if he had come up with a brilliant idea. Sorry, but that's not possible. When I turned 18, Grandma changed the house's title to my name. The remodeling was done then, too. It's been over 10 years, so it can't be considered for the compulsory portion of the inheritance. Hearing this, Dad's face turned beet red. Mom, equally infuriated, screamed with her eyes bulging.
What is this? What's going on? Why does it belong to you? A monster shouldn't be receiving anything.
Mom's shrieking figure somehow looked pitiful to me now. Amidst the swirl of old frustrations and anger, I felt a chill at the core of my head. Taking a breath, I calmly told Mom,
I've always wanted to say this, but I am not a monster. I'm a human being. There's no reason for Mom and Dad, who only think about their luxuries, to insult me. I also know from Grandma why I bumped into the stove.
At that moment, Mom, eyes wide, lunged at me.
Shut up. Shut up. Shut up. How dare you speak like that?
Mom grabbed me by the collar, startling me momentarily.
It's your fault for being there in the first place. That's why you're worthless. That's why you're a monster. There's nothing wrong with that.
She hurled every insult she could think of at me, shaking my collar repeatedly. After a struggle, with Madison's help, I managed to break free from her grasp. From a distance, Dad's voice could be heard.
But there must be other assets, right? Like jewelry, valuable dishes, and such.
Saying this, Dad began rummaging through another cabinet. Mom glanced at me menacingly for a moment before following Dad. Then, they ravaged Grandma's meticulously kept rooms out of greed. The living room, guest room, kitchen, everything was disrupted, drawers were pulled out violently, and items scattered on the floor and tables were knocked over. The sight of Grandma's beautiful home being destroyed was too much, and I screamed out.
Stop! Don't touch that! Shut up! It's none of your business.
Mom snapped, searching through a closet. Dad barged into another room, continuing the chaos.
Please stop! I'm calling the police! I pleaded. Go ahead and call.
Dad taunted, so I, without hesitation, called the police with Madison's help. Given my known profession, the responding officers arrived quickly upon hearing of the intrusion. Two sturdy policemen soon subdued Dad and Mom.
Stop! I'm the son of this house. We just asked our daughter to let us in for a bit.
They tried to excuse themselves while attempting to escape, but they were no match for the strong officers and were dragged outside. After the storm passed, I collapsed in the hallway. Madison apologized for letting them in, but I reassured her it wasn't her fault. After catching my breath, I began cleaning up the mess they made. When I turned 18, Grandma, hoping for my future, transferred the house and all her assets to me as a living gift. Noticing my intellect, she saw potential for me to take over the company as an entrepreneur. Already advanced in age, Grandma thought about having me take over the company in the future. At the same time, she wanted to sever ties with Dad and Mom, who abandoned me and, despite being executives, did not do their jobs properly and seemed intent on ruining the company. Thus, she had been preparing little by little so that most of her estate would pass to me after her death. Grandma taught me not only school subjects but also about arts, world cultures, knowledge of economics, the demeanor of a professional, and how to behave as a business owner. To me, this knowledge was more valuable than any house or money. She always taught me this. Money is very important, but people are even more so. Money is necessary for the world and the company. But the people who work for the company and the customers are even more important. Those who don't value people will never find happiness. Grandma repeated these teachings, and they were firmly engraved in my heart. And as promised, I took over her company. Now, I am the president of the company. Afterward, Dad and Mom contacted the house several times, inquiring about life insurance or the cash they thought should have been passed on to me, but their wishes were never fulfilled. Most of Grandma's estate had been used up for my tuition and the house renovations, and she had also made me the beneficiary of her life insurance. Thanks to the excellent lawyer and accountant she had introduced to me, who had served her for many years, Dad and Mom were always out-argued and had to back down. A few months later, it was decided that the subsidiary where Dad worked as an executive would be absorbed by the headquarters. The ongoing suspicions about performance reached a limit, making it difficult to continue operating as a subsidiary. Consequently, Dad's dismissal was decided. Not only had he failed to perform his duties and contributed to poor performance, but it was also discovered he had been embezzling company funds. This became a widespread issue, and it would be more accurate to say he was fired for misconduct. Since Mom was a housewife, their income disappeared with Dad's dismissal. Having spent lavishly on trips and luxury brands, they had no savings, and it was only a matter of time before they would struggle even for living expenses. At that time, tired from work, I received a call at home from an unknown number. Being the president of a company, it wasn't unusual to receive calls from unregistered numbers, so I answered without hesitation. "Hey, Sophia. It's me, your mom." The voice that came through was Mom's, who had hurled abuse at me for so long. I didn't want to hear that voice again and was about to hang up, but I stayed silent, waiting for her to continue. "How could you get Dad fired? I don't work, and I can't live like this. Are you going to take responsibility? We'll come to your house. You'll take care of us, right?" Hearing her move forward with such a convenient story, I was astounded. After all the disdain and the recent ransacking of the house, to now live together and expect support was beyond audacious. I cut her off immediately. "Wait, what are you talking about? That's not possible." Mom quickly soured. "What do you mean? I'm your parent. It's a child's duty to help when their parents are struggling. You're the president of a company, you're not short on money." I stood firm against such selfish reasoning.
I have no obligation to live with people who have badmouthed and abandoned me. I haven't forgotten what you've done. You're not my parents in any sense.
After saying that, I ended the call and immediately blocked Mom's number. I was deeply dismayed and spent some time lost in thought. I remembered Mom's glamorous dresses and the fancy bags she brought back from trips. She had always lived according to her desires. I won't help now. Hoping nothing strange happens again, I fell asleep with a prayer. However, my prayer went unanswered. A few days later, my parents showed up at the house again. Unfortunately, it was Madison's day off, so there was no one to send them away. Since I responded to the doorbell, pretending not to be home wasn't an option. I had no choice but to go out.
How cruel of you to refuse to live with us,
Mom said, distorting her face and spewing venom as soon as she saw me. Next to her, Dad, glaring at me, said roughly,
"If we can't live here, then give us money. As a CEO who fired me, you must be earning well. Just give us $10,000 a month, starting with $10,000 right now."
I felt dizzy from their audacity. I erased all expressions from my face and shook my head quietly.
"I've said this before, but I have no obligation to give you anything. I don't even consider you as my parents, so please leave."
As I tried to close the gate, Dad forcefully held it open.
"Don't be stupid. We're telling you we can't live without money. $10,000 is just pocket change for you, right? I don't have such pocket change. Every amount of money must be valued. That's what Grandma taught me."
Unlike my parents, who would spend as much as they earned, she taught me the value of money. Giving them money would not lead to prudent living on their part. Then, Mom started making a scene.
"What's the point of bringing up someone who's already dead? Just give us the money. We won't move from here until you do."
With that, they crossed their arms and sat down right there. Having them squat there was a nuisance not only to me but to the neighbors as well. I quickly took out my mobile phone from my pocket and called the police. Just like before, the officers arrived quickly and detained my parents. This time, I asked for a restraining order against them. They were still ranting as they were taken away by the police, but now, it was truly none of my concern. I just wished they would find work and live on their own. They had to sell off most of their accumulated luxury goods and cars, living in a cheap, old apartment with the money from those sales. It seems both of them had accumulated debts from their spending habits. They had been counting on Grandma's inheritance, which they believed they would receive. Living in poverty with about $40,000 in debt each became their new reality. Mom, who had thrown a fit when Dad was demoted, couldn't stand the now unemployed and poor Dad, planning to divorce him because she had no use for a man without money. However, realizing she would still have to pay off her own debts even after divorce, Mom, who had been a housewife, withdrew the divorce and started working part-time, all the while looking down on Dad. The relationship that once seemed close enough for frequent trips together broke down, and their life together turned hostile. Every day, Mom would taunt the penniless Dad, leading to fruitless arguments, making them the neighborhood nuisances. A contact living near their apartment informed me that their spending habits hadn't changed. They spent their meager earnings from low-wage jobs on luxury goods and expensive meals, eventually being chased down by debt collectors. Recognized as problematic by the apartment manager, they fled as if running away. And their whereabouts after that are unknown to anyone. Dad and Mom, who had denied and abandoned their own daughter, were eventually forsaken by money and the world. As for me, continuing as president of the company Grandma left me, my business acumen is highly regarded by clients and employees alike. As a result, I've expanded the company by establishing subsidiaries nationwide, choosing competent personnel as presidents for each, and the company continues to grow. Money is very important, but people are even more so. I continue to uphold Grandma's teaching as my principle. Additionally, based on my own experiences, I started supporting activities for people struggling with burns, fire accidents, or injuries. Many company employees voluntarily supported the initiative, and as the activities spread through our website, the organization's operations have become busier. Though I didn't expect any personal relationships due to my busy work, I became personally involved with a male executive assistant who supported me during a busy period of business expansion, leading to a relationship. A few years later, we married and were blessed with 2 children. My precious children are treasures just by being there. I'm committed to raising them with love, ensuring they never suffer physical or emotional harm. Money is very important. But people are even more important. Surrounded by the company's employees, business partners, my husband, and our lovely children, I will live my life happily, never forgetting my gratitude and affection for these important people.